Thanks for staying with us. Time now for Africa News with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, at least 10 people are killed in clashes between ex-rebel and Christian militia in the capital of Central African Republic. The new leader, due to be sworn in tomorrow, hopes to return stability to the chaotic nation. Also, there are warnings that growing unemployment in Africa is driving illegal migration to Europe. This is the world's elite meet to discuss global economic challenges in Davos. And we head to Ivory Coast, where authorities have started forcibly moving whole herds of elephants across the country, for the good of both the animals themselves and the communities living around them. First up, at least 10 people have been killed in clashes between Muslim ex-Seleka rebels and Christian militia in Central African Republic. Fighting broke out overnight in central Bangui, near the city's prison. Our correspondent witnessed French peacekeeping medics struggling to save one former insurgent caught up in the violence. Meanwhile, nearby, crowds later celebrated his death. Chaos has escalated in the country since last year's rebel takeover. Bangui's mayor, Catherine Samba Panza, will tomorrow be sworn in as interim leader of the country. She's asked the hundreds of thousands of displaced people to start heading back home. France24's Ben Barnier went to meet one family who's risked the return home.
After many weeks in exile, Pastor Nalin Gualeso, his wife and their 5 children have finally returned home. They had fled to the Democratic Republic of Congo after violent clashes in the neighborhood between the Christian militia Anti-Balaka and former rebels the Seleka.
Yes, this is the place of the bullet holes, and the second is there. And it's after this situation because my child used to rest here in the daytime, and when he shooted, the bullet fall here, and I decided to take my family away because we are no more secure in this situation.
While the preacher's wife says it's more comfortable to be home than abroad, she hasn't forgotten the acts of violence that threaten her little ones.
Our kids are small, so if something bad happens again, we're going to have to flee. That's very scary.
Narle says he can't go back to his church because it is surrounded by the Seleka, but he deems it important to start rebuilding a normal life in his neighborhood. And with the new president, Catherine Samba Panza, the country is on the right track.
Yes, the election of the new president is a good news because I know that this woman will not be part of any military group. She's going to play a role as a neutral person to bring back peace and to also bring reconciliation between the people.
There are still thousands of displaced people, victims of outbreaks of violence in the Central African Republic. The new president is hoping to pacify the country and convince them to return home.
France24's Ben Barnier there for us in Bangui. Now, South Sudan's accusing rebels of having slaughtered 127 hospital patients as the army took back the city of Bor from insurgents last month. Now, it's been devastated in recent battling between President Salva Kiir's troops and fighters loyal to his former number 2, Riek Machar. The UN's warned that thousands have been killed so far, but President Kiir has accused the body of interfering and of backing Machar. Protests were held in Juba this week, with Kiir's supporters also demanding that the UN stop meddling. Meanwhile, Kenya's announced on Wednesday that East African troops will make up part of a 5,500-strong UN peacekeeping force in South Sudan. France24's correspondent is in Nairobi for us. He joins us now. Mading Noor, troops are now being sent out, but what the UN's really hoping for is likely more movement on peace talks taking place in Addis Ababa.
Yes, that's correct. But the UN mandate has been going on for a while. It started just 2 days before South Sudan, the newest nation, gained independence. It was a decision made by the Security Council because they reasoned that this new nation would be a fragile nation and it would need the backing of the world. And the nation was put under the Chapter 7 mandate. And that mandate has been problematic. South Sudan has been feeling over the years that its sovereignty is being undermined by the UN because the main goal of the mandate is to protect civilians, but it really goes further to talk about reforms within the institutions of the government, and the implementation of this mandate has been causing tension between the UN and South Sudan. That was manifested in 2012 in April when the UN Secretary General was urging government to withdraw from what they perceive to be Sudanese territory. And this has been playing over during the conflict. There's a perception in South Sudan that the UN is supporting the rebels directly or indirectly.
Thanks very much. Mading there for us in Nairobi, discussing ongoing violence in South Sudan. Now, social inequalities plaguing Africa are amongst the issues being discussed at the Davos World Economic Forum in Switzerland. The annual meeting brings together the global elite, but the plight of the world's most vulnerable underpins many of the discussions on the agenda.
Far from Africa, in the snowy hills of Davos, the rich and powerful have come back for the annual World Economic Forum. In all, 2,500 participants are here, including African heads of state such as Nigeria's Goodluck Jonathan and Liberia's Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. Africa is the world's poorest continent, and this has consequences here in Europe, warned Liberia's president.
Structural unemployment affects most vulnerable young people, particularly from Africa, that continue to seek refuge in Europe, risking their lives in perilous voyages to pursue a livelihood with resulting racial tensions in host countries.
A day before Davos began, the NGO Oxfam said the richest 85 people in the world control as much wealth as the poorest half of the global population.
It leads to a hijacking of democracy and power. And increasingly we see that this concentration of wealth and power really passes on privilege and disadvantage from one generation to the next.
Africa is the fastest growing continent with rates of more than 5% a year. But NGOs like Oxfam want to convince the business leaders here that this means little if its high inequalities cannot be reduced.
Ugandan courts ordered the immediate deportation of a British man facing criminal charges of possessing a gay sex video. Bernard Randall has denied trafficking in obscene publications after images were found on a laptop stolen from his house. He was charged alongside his friend and housemate, Ugandan Albert Cheptoyek. Homosexuality is illegal in Uganda, and Randall's lawyers are saying that prosecutors are using the excuse of an expired visa for his deportation after failing to find evidence against him in the criminal case. To Ivory Coast now, where authorities have started forcibly moving whole herds of elephants across the country. The project is to ensure the well-being both of the huge beasts themselves and that of villagers living around their usual stomping grounds.
In the high brushland of Côte d'Ivoire, after hours of tracking by helicopter, the elephant was finally found. It is a huge bull, one of the last of its kind in the forests of the country. A dart was fired from the helicopter. The elephant is anesthetized and falls asleep. Its 7-ton body collapses before astonished villagers. This is the first transporting of an elephant from the forest. A total of 10 will be transported from the Marahoe National Park and its reduced living space. They are being taken to another park in the south of the country, where they will have more space.
One of the first difficulties is just to find the animals. They're scattered here amongst the people. The biggest difficulty of all is after darting these animals to recover them back to the truck for transport out of here.
In the village, people were celebrating. For the past 2 years, these wild elephants have brought panic to the region of Daloa. The villagers are frightened. 3 have been killed and entire fields ripped up.
By moving this herd of elephants, we are saving them and also guaranteeing the well-being and safety of the people.
Still knocked out, the elephants are carefully transferred into a cage where they awake, ready for the major trip. 10 hours on the road to the new park. This transfer operation will last 10 days. The operation is costing 500,000 euros, financed by the Ivorian government and the World Fund for the Protection of Wildlife. The investment is needed to save the elephants, a valuable tourist attraction.
That wraps up Africa News for me. More news and headlines from around the world, though, coming up shortly with Mark Owen.